Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you to the OCNA Candidates Forum for the 49th House of Representatives race. This is really an important race, as I know you all know, and there are a lot of people who have graciously decided to run. We did invite everybody who said they were running in this race, but some people could not attend. So we thank all the candidates who could attend, some of whom changed their schedules to be here. And we thank the League of Women Voters for running this very real play.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Lois Martins. I am the moderator this evening, and I am a member of League of Women Voters of North County, San Diego. So with that, I do want to introduce all of the candidates. And I'm going to introduce them alphabetically. Please hold your applause if the candidate would just raise his or her hand when I call your name. Doug Applegate, Joshua Hancock, Sara Jacobs, Paul Kerr, David Medway, Jordan Mills, Craig Nordal, Robert Pendleton, Mike Schmidt, Joshua Schoonover, and Dannielle St. Thank you all for being here. And with that, let's begin our opening statements. Remember, they each have 1 minute for an opening statement. And for the opening statements, we're going to begin down with number 1 and come across this way. At the end, for the closing statements, we will reverse the order. So with that, it looks like Ms. Jacobs is the first one down there. Would you like to begin?
Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and the Oceanside Coastal Neighborhood Association for putting on this forum. I'm Sara Jacobs, and like many women around the country, I never thought that I would run for office. But our country is in a defining moment. We have an unfair and unequal system that's giving access to opportunity to some, but leaving so many others behind. We know that our system is broken, but the good news is that we can fix it, and that starts by changing the face of power in this country. I know I don't look like most of the people that we send to Congress, but that's a good thing, because if we could solve the problems we're facing with the same people we've been sending, they would have been solved already. I joined President Obama's State Department because I believed in his message that real change was possible. I worked in innovation at UNICEF and was the CEO of an international education nonprofit. I know how to bring a group of people with diverse perspectives around the table to come together and find solutions that actually solve problems. So again, my name is Sara Jacobs, and I hope that you'll join us in shaking things up. And I'm really excited to take your questions, and I would be honored to have your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Applegate.
Well, good evening. Thank you very much for coming out to the forum. And I'm Doug Applegate. I ran against Darrell Lysa and ran in the 49th before it was cool. It's gotten real cool. Listen, let me talk about what I've been for the last 3 years. And it all revolves around income disparity. One, I've always been for single-payer Medicare. We have the benefit of having 50% of the world's biotech companies here, and that's what's going to change it and make it efficient. The other thing is education. We need to start sooner, around 2, go through 16 years, and further. The other thing that we need to do is 100% renewables within 10 years. End subsidies, get serious. We can get it done in California first. I'm Colonel Doug Applegate, an Iraq vet, and I'm ready to be your congressman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Applegate. Next we'll have Mr. Pendleton.
Hello, my name is Dr. Robert Pendleton, and I feel that I'm the best qualified candidate for Congress. I grew up in this district, and my family has lived here for over 50 years. I'm an eye surgeon and owner of the Pendleton Eye Center, a small business in Oceanside, for over 20 years. I have a PhD in biochemistry, and in 2016 I founded a new, socially liberal, fiscally conservative, militarily prepared, moderate political party based on 9 principles called K9. K9 is a political party and philosophy of decision-making that can lead us to health, happiness, tolerance, security, freedom, and world peace. In Congress, I promise never to caucus with either party. I'm running for office because I'm tired of a broken 2-party system, and I'm concerned about our future, the future of our coastline, our air and water. I'm concerned about the future of medicine, education, and science. I'm concerned about the future of our constitutional liberties, and I'm concerned about the future of this great nation.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Mr. Nordal.
Thank you. Craig Nordal, and I just want to point out that it does say 2 minutes for opening statements, but I'll keep it to 1. My rules say 2 minutes. I don't want to go against it. So Craig Nordal, lived most of my life here in 49. I run a business, real estate business, raised my family. I have 5 daughters. That qualifies me for Congress if nothing else does, right? And I just, I think I was in this before Doug. I actually was in Brian Bilbray first one, and I bowed out because I thought Brian had a little more clout than me, and so I bowed out. I love my country. That's why I'm running. I think this is an incredible chance for you to have, in my case, a true conservative. You go to High Voter, you can see everyone's positions here, and I think it very accurately describes where everyone is. I would say I'm a very strong Trump supporter, and I don't know how many people I would raise their hand and say they are, but Craig Nordal, businessman, true conservative.
Thank you, Mr. Nordal. Mr. Medway.
Hi, I'm Dr. David Medway. I've been called doctor for the last 25 years, but if you choose to call me Mr. Medway tonight, then that's perfectly fine. Once every 25 years is no problem. But I am a doctor, board-certified internist. I went to George Washington Medical School, UCLA undergraduate. Pretty much covered all the UCs. My dad went to USC, my wife went to UC San Diego, my mom went to UC Berkeley. I was an assistant professor at UC Irvine for many years, so just by all the UC votes, I think I have most of California covered. I was very happy to privileged to take care of all walks of life when I was at GW. We took care of the homeless, we took care of generals. President Reagan was shot and thanked our school for saving his life 10 years later. I'm a medical director at a nonprofit community clinic, and I'm very proud to have this opportunity to run for Congress.
Thank you. I do have to take exception to you including USC in the UC system. I happen to also be a UCLA grad. All right, moving on. Mr. Hancock.
Hello everyone, my name is Josh Hancock. I would first like to thank the League of Women's Voters for inviting me up here today. I'd also like to thank all the other candidates for coming tonight. And I know from experience putting your name forward is a very costly and on a personal level, and I truly believe that everyone up here is trying to make the country a better place. And also, thank you all for coming tonight. Our republic only works with active and informed citizens. I'm a husband and a father and a veteran of the Marine Corps and an Eagle Scout. I've been a member of the Oceanside community for the last 28 plus years. You'll hear me talk a lot today about limiting the size and influence of government, defending individual rights, strengthening the economy, and reinforcing our constitutional rights. I hope by hearing a little bit about me and learning what motivates me, you'll consider me as your 49th District Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Mr. Schoonover.
Yes, thank you. I hope you all can hear me sufficiently. I'm getting over a cold today, so I hope my voice projects. But anyway, my name is Joshua Schoonover. I'm a patent attorney. As a patent attorney, I help individuals and businesses solve federal government issues. I read and study federal laws. I prepare and amend federal legal writings, and I negotiate with federal agency staff. I have a reputation in North County, San Diego, for helping others and getting things done. In fact, I've helped many individual and startup companies progress and build those companies to become very successful. Just last month, I helped one of my clients close an acquisition for $150 million. and they were just a small group of a few individuals when they started. I'm a conservative Republican. I believe in 5 core principles: individual freedom, personal accountability, low taxes, a small government, and a very strong military. So I hope you'll consider me on June 5th. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Schoonover. Next, we have Mr. Mills.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this off, and the audience for being here, my fellow candidates, as well as my wife Ann over here on the side. She's been putting up with a lot these last few months. My name is Jordan Mills from the Peace and Freedom Party, and I've got some good news and some bad news. Starting with the bad news, I think everyone in this auditorium has been let down by the two-party system. Those of you who think of yourselves as conservatives probably believe in things like fiscal restraint and balancing the budget and the Constitution. Those of you who consider yourself liberals probably believe in providing education and jobs for people, as well as health care. None of that is possible given the state of perpetual war that the two parties have been responsible for in this country for a generation. All the fiscal restraint's not going to happen. The budget will never be passed. The Constitution will be shredded. The good news is, though, is we can break free of that and work with me. Some of you just want to keep kicking that football like Charlie Brown and voting for these two parties, but you can also work with me in the streets. We're having a demonstration against the escalation of the Iran war at Oceanside Pier on Sunday, and I'd like to see as many of you out there as I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Next, we have Ms. St. John.
I think you guys might be in trouble putting us together. But so, my name is Dannielle St. I am running because I'm sick of the political system. I'm sick of our two-party system not representing any of us. And I'm a product of this district. I was born in San Diego and spent the majority of my life in this district. I have been in the trenches. I am on the board of the prison ministry and have been affiliated for 20 years. Just fighting in the trenches, trying to fight for my community. And I think that I'm the best suited to, I'm a real person, and I'm the best suited to represent the people in Washington.
Thank you, Ms. St. John. Next, we have Mr. Kerr.
62 years in a minute. Let's go. For starters, folks, my family was almost pushed into bankruptcy due to a healthcare crisis. As a result, I'm going to be the most passionate advocate on the planet for Medicare for all. I've spent over 14 years of my life working minimum wage jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. I know what income inequality tastes like, and I want to get to work solving those problems. I had to work full-time through college. I had to take on over $20,000 in student debt in order to graduate. But that education meant all the difference in my life. We must, and I will, find the money, and we need to reprioritize our issues, our spending. We must invest in education, start to finish. Finally, I'm an enlisted veteran, and if I'm fortunate enough to win this race, I'll be the only enlisted veteran on the Democratic side in the House of Representatives. My name is Paul Kerr, and I very much look forward to our questions today.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. And finally, we have Mr. Schmidt.
Good evening. Thank you for coming out and spending your evening. Thank you to the League. My name is Dr. Mike Schmidt. I'm a doctor of neuroaudiology. I work full-time in healthcare. I feel I'm the most suited person and the most qualified candidate up here on the dais and in the race altogether. I believe that the three major issues facing us, according to what I've heard from all of you out there and the polls, healthcare, immigration, and the economy. All three are integrally related to each other. I work full-time in healthcare. We have a Frankenstein health system right now that is driving us broke through the Medicare process. It definitely needs an overhaul. I've been a unifier all of my life. I've been a congressional envoy to the Middle East and Iraq. I've been there 3 times in 2 years, taking testimonies of Yazidis and Christian survivors of ISIS, turning it over to Congress. We created House Resolution 75, passed 393-0, bipartisan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you for really trying to hold to that 1 minute, which is what it states in the instructions. But maybe you have some old instructions from a different, that could be old. We had to change our protocol when we had so many candidates, so you should have received the new ones. I'm sorry if you didn't. All right, we're going to go to our questions. The first question I'm going to ask is going to be addressed to candidates Applegate, Pendleton, Nordal, and Medway. Give you all fair warning. And the question is, what is your position on San Onofre safe storage on spent fuel? We'll start with Mr. Applegate.
This is pretty easy. What they're doing right now is anything but safe. They're burying it 18 feet above high tide in stainless steel casks that are too thin and can't be reopened on site. And we've only got the Inglewood Fault right off the coast. Think about it. The only beach in Southern California that has tsunami sirens, because I lived in San Clemente before I moved back to Oceanside, is San Clemente. It shouldn't be stored there. It can't be moved to Pendleton. It needs to be moved out of the middle of 12 million Southern Californians, and it needs to go to a less populated area. Physicists have not solved this problem, so it's going to be an interim move. And no, it won't work over in Nevada where it's going to pollute water. We need to do something quick, because once you get it in the ground, SDG&E and Edison is not going to be able to take it out. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go the same question once again. What is your position on San Onofre safe storage on spent fuel? And we will go to Mr. Pendleton.
Well, the nuclear waste sitting in San Onofre is a potential disaster of sort of unbelievable scale. I mean, we actually live very close to an intense potential source of radiation that at any time, if that somehow got loose, would poison our coastline, it would poison our air, it would require an immediate evacuation of all of us in the 49th district. It's a potential disaster. If someone were to bomb that site and break it open, or if it somehow boiled over and leaked, if there was an earthquake and it fell into the water, there's all kinds of potential scenarios where this could become a huge public health disaster. So it needs to be moved, and that has to be a high priority to get that thing out of here. There were plans to move it to Yucca Mountain, and those have been sort of stalled. And there's a better place for it. There is not a good place for it, but there's a better place for it.
Thank you. Mr. Nordal.
Thank you. Well, I don't like to give any credit to any other candidates, but I'm going to actually give credit to Josh Hancock here, who taught me more about this issue than I knew. He actually has worked with it. So I'm going to, if I say something incorrect, Josh can correct me. So, I think we're all in agreement here. It's not a good place to put this. Unfortunately, it's become a political football, and we need to come up with a solution. I think, from according to what Josh, and I did do some research on it, there is a possibility, I have a Bachelor of Science, but not a nuclear science, of actually recycling this material, but it's not allowed because of previous laws that were passed. So we should look into those laws and look into a way to recycle. If that's possible, I think everybody would be for that. That would get rid of this problem, not store it somewhere else where it could be a hazard for other areas and other generations. So that would be my answer. Really look into that situation. Did I cover that pretty good, Josh? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And lastly, candidate Medway.
Yes, so I'm a physician, and I've been protecting the lives of my patients for the last 25 plus years. And this is a very important issue. My children are affected, all of my patients, all of the community, all of San Diego and Los Angeles will be affected by this. Fukushima is an example of this can happen to us in our time. We need to do something about this, and it needs to be done right away. It's all a matter of finances. There are communities in Nevada that would be interested in taking this in their communities. It would create jobs for them. We need to be able to do that, just transfer it, and we'll have to, it will cost somewhat, but we need to do that.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we'll go to our next question. And this question is addressed to candidates Hancock, Schoonover, Mills, and St. John. The question says, For a long time, Democrats have asserted that Citizens United has unleashed too much money into campaigns. Whether that is the main cause or not, elections seem to devolve into a race about who can raise the most. Any way we can curb this? Question mark. Suggestions. And we will begin with Mr. Hancock.
Well, being that I'm libertarian, I believe that there shouldn't be, excuse me, I'm getting over the cold that Brian gave us the last time we were here, but there should not be special interest money in politics. It basically just gets bribes for people. And it's, also we have the special interest money that have gone into politics are basically buying their vote, and there are corporations out there that, and other special interests, for example, Planned Parenthood, which is government funded, yet spends money, taxpayer money, to push their own agenda. And I disagree with taxpayer money going to push agendas. It should be nonpartisan. And there's a lot of other political money out there that doesn't belong there. So,
Thank you. Mr. Schoonover.
Thank you. You know, I believe Citizens United has really damaged politics in our country. It's allowed those behind the scenes, the super PACs, the super duper PACs, and every other organization to excessively raise and spend money without control and without accountability. I personally have taken a stand against this. In this campaign, I have a list of over 75 individuals who offered me a max contribution, and I told them no. What politician does that? I'm not a politician. You know, these are mostly my clients in my law practice, and I didn't want to take their money. I wanted to fund it myself. I wanted to touch 5,000 people, so I went out and bought 5,000 business cards, and I've been handing them out across the district since I started on January 10th. I think candidates should be responsible and should not take money from special interests and from PACs, but I think we need to do something to take money out of politics. This country and our political system is a swampy mess. We need term limits, and we need to do something about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Mills.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm in agreement with the rest of the answer to this question, which is an ironic thing. It shows that both sides of the political spectrum can be appalled by the same terrible law. Yes, Citizens United is an abomination. The idea that if you have more money, you have more ability to speak, it goes against all the democratic ideas that this country is supposed to be about. But it goes way further than just Citizens United, down to the primary law that all of us are speaking on that is meant to exclude third parties, down to the increasing corporate influence on politics at every level. It's something we have to fight. So concretely, I believe in publicly financed elections with a shorter term and guarantees that all voices will be heard to keep corporations out of the controlling position they have in our political process. And I don't even think we need to stop with the politics. Why, if we're so offended by the corporations controlling our democracy, do we not mind that they control our food and our health care, and we're privatizing our schools and we're smashing unions everywhere? The Peace and Freedom Party stands for any corporate influence on politics and corporate influence on everything else that makes up the stuff of life. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Ms. St. John.
I believe that Citizens United is more of a symptom of the massive problem that we have going on in our government, where because of lobbyists and because of super PACs and because of all of the money in Washington, it has effectively insulated our politicians, leaving our voices out of the equation. So I know that there are a few people up here tonight who are not taking any corporate money. I'm one of them. And I really think that the decision, when especially for these seats or for congressional seats, to vote for somebody who does not take any corporate money would go a long way of fixing this problem. But I think the problem starts with the voting booths, honestly.
Thank you. And now we'll go to our next question, and this question will be addressed to candidates Kerr, Schmidt, Jacobs, and Applegate. And the question is, or the statement is, there may be another outbreak of Ebola in Africa. However, in the last year or so, we have cut funds that the CDC says are so crucial to heading off the next global pandemic. What would you do? And we are going to begin with Mr. Kerr.
We've got to start by changing our funding priorities in this country, specifically the CDC. There are a number of issues that they dig into, such as this one. Yet their funding's been challenged as so many other departments, education, the EPA, etc. The CDC, for example, digs into issues related to gun violence, and that has been stopped, and I think that's wrong for starters. But the answer to the question, quite simply, is we need to reprioritize our funding. One of the things I want to do, get out of Afghanistan. We've been in Afghanistan for 17 years, folks, at a cost of over $45 billion a year, if in fact you believe the Pentagon estimates, and I don't, I think they're understated. But getting back to the issue, we've got to reprioritize our funding. Personally, I believe we need to increase our investments in education. We need to increase investment in the EPA, and I need to stop because that red sign's up.
Thank you. You know, you people are being so good about that tonight. I am so impressed. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Schmidt.
Well, the CDC, I feel, has actually done a very good job, specifically on the Ebola. What I found remarkable was the massive heroes that went to Africa to fight that. I had the unusual opportunity to be just down the road from that doctor that we brought back. Ironically, he didn't stop after all of this. He went back and he was in Bartala, just north of Mosul, the exact same time I was there last year, doing amazing, amazing work. Really, the answer to the CDC is a supplement to great work that heroes do. The CDC, I would like to say, and I'll probably surprise a few of my liberal friends up here, they should be doing some research on gun violence, and that doesn't, that's one of the things that I agree that they should be doing. But I believe that they do a very good job in so far as what they do. They're the best in the world at it.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
Well, thank you to whoever asked this question, because this is an issue that doesn't get enough attention. I actually worked on the Zika crisis 2 summers ago when we know that Congress took too long to act. One of the things that I did when I was at UNICEF in their innovation unit actually was to build up a big data system that used new technologies to better predict Ebola and Zika and where they were going to move, and that actually helped increase UNICEF's ability to respond more rapidly. When it comes to natural disasters, we have what's called the Stafford Act, which means that funding immediately can be spent. It doesn't need to be appropriated. And I believe we need to set up a public health rapid response fund that has constant, steady appropriations that we can use to address and respond to these pandemic and other public health threats, so that we're not at the behest of each individual Congress, but that there's constant funding and we can work on prevention as well as rapid response.
Thank you. Mr. Applegate?
Just so we can focus on what the dilemma is, it's a pandemic caused by a virus. Spanish flu, it can still happen. What happened after the tax bill? Pfizer declared the biggest dividend they've ever done in history, and they dropped the only 2 drugs it had in research for dementia and Alzheimer's. We have 50% of the biotech companies in the southern part of the 49. It's the key to an efficient health system because Big Pharma does not believe in cures at all. Biotech does. It's the biggest threat, and if we deal with it like we did Ebola, even if it's an emergency funding, it isn't going to stop a pandemic. We need research. We need to help monetize the biotechs that will spend up to more than $500 million to get to phase 3 testing. And we need to do that by allowing them to monetize their net operating loss forward, but we need to incentivize our research because we have no active ingredients being manufactured in drugs right now.
Thank you. And we will go to our next question and this will be addressed to candidates Pendleton, Nordal, Medway, and Hancock. And the question is, what are your views on the separation of church and state? And Mr. Pendleton, you're up first.
Well, I'm a strong believer in that the Constitution was a brilliant document, and that our country was founded by geniuses and currently is being run by idiots. I think there should be an absolute separation of church and state. In fact, I would go so far as to say our currency, by saying in God we trust, is actually advertising to the world that we're a particular religion, that we're a Judeo-Christian nation. And we certainly have that as our foundation, but we're an amalgamation of all kinds of people. And I think when the building at 9/11 was hit, the World Trade Center, we all sort of scratched our heads and said, what the heck is going on? People are willing to kill themselves in order to fight this holy war against us. And the dollar is the currency of trade in so many things. It's found everywhere in the world. I've traveled all over the third world. People are stuffing dollar bills in their mattresses all over the world. And it's affront to them. There's no reason why we can't do that. I think there should be an absolute separation of church and state.
And Mr. Nordal.
Well, I think that this is the best question we could possibly have tonight. It goes to the heart of the matter of this country. I'm an evangelical Christian. I'm comforted to see a crucifix behind me. We're in a Catholic school. The Founding Fathers were very clear. Freedom of O-F, religion. Not freedom from religion, freedom of religion. Now, everyone quotes this thing that they say Jefferson said. It's just not true. Jefferson and the Founding Fathers formed this country because they didn't want to be forced into the Anglican Church, one church of the Christian faith. They were all Christians. Every single founding document was founded on the faith and the morality of the Christian and the Jewish religion, the Christian religion. Folks, without it, this country goes down the tubes, as you have seen for the last 8 years. We need to go back to that. We need to get it back in our schools. We need to get back in our government. I'll read a quick statement. If you'll run out of time, stop me. Okay, I'll catch you later.
I'm sorry. Maybe you can hit that when you give your closing statement. Okay, Mr. Medway.
Yes. First, I'd just like to very quickly touch upon the previous question to the candidates about Ebola virus. I just wrote a book, which I'm giving away free, to protect our country against any kind of pandemic, both man-made and environmental. So if you go to my website, drmedwayforcongress.com, and you just check in, you will automatically get an ebook for free. It's just something I'm doing to help the world, basically. So I just wanted to let you know I feel very strongly and passionately about protecting all of us from any kind of epidemic, pandemic. And then to touch upon the question that you asked, I am a strong believer in the separation of church and state. Everybody's rights, creeds, ethics need to be respected. There are theocracies in other countries like Iran where that's not the case. You don't have to look very far. And in your decision for who you pick, there is a moderate choice for you who will protect our borders, who will protect women's right for reproductive choices. I am that candidate.
Thank you. And last, we have Mr. Hancock.
All right. I'm a libertarian. I believe in personal freedom. If you want to, which means you're free to worship wherever you want, and the government should not tell you who you should worship or what to worship. That being said, the Founding Fathers were smart. They put the separation of church and state together just to keep the church from taking over the government. And that was it. So they didn't want to deal with theocratically controlled government. And they, because those were kind of back in northern Africa with the Barbary pirates and the takeover of the Muslims and pushing in those theocratic societies, and the kings being in charge of England, creating their own churches. They wanted the separation of church and state and the freedom for everybody to worship how they want and not force their views on anybody else.
Thank you. We're going to change the format slightly now, and I'm going to ask a yes or no question of all of the candidates. We'll be starting our yes or no with candidate Nordal, and we'll move up the rest of the way and back down to Ms. Jacobs and finish off there. So it's a yes or no question. The question is, will you or won't you support Trump's border wall funding? Yes or no? Beginning with Mr. Nordal.
Yes.
I don't think you went in order.
It's very random.
Okay, I'll read them off. Okay, Mr. Nordal, yes or no?
Again, yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Pendleton,
No.
Mr. Schmidt,
Yes.
Mr. Applegate,
No.
Ms. Jacobs,
No.
Mr. Kerr,
No.
Mr. Medway,
Yes, Dr. Medway.
Mr. Mills,
No!
Ms. St. John,
No.
Mr. Hancock.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we'll go back to the regular way. See what the next question is. And this one is going to be for candidates Schoonover, Mills, St. John, and Kerr. And the question is, how would you assure the taxes won't increase? Mr. Schoonover.
Well, that's a great question. No matter who wins up on this stage, we're going to be one of 435 representatives. I don't think one person can ensure that the taxes will not go up. But as a conservative Republican, I'll tell you, I will do everything in my power means I will vote no on every tax increase that I possibly can. I think all conservatives are against taxes. Tax increases. We're paying way too much, and the government is just wasting it. So I think we need responsible leadership. I think we need to allocate our resources responsibly. We need a balanced budget, and I will not vote for tax increases.
Thank you. Mr. Mills?
Well, this is kind of a tough question because I don't think there is such a unitary phenomenon as a single thing as a tax increase. I would stop the giveaway to billionaires that we had with the recent tax bill that was signed in Washington. And if that means increasing the taxes on the 1% out there, or increasing corporate taxes, or keeping loopholes shut to keep people from having offshore companies that pay no taxes, or that companies like Amazon should pay some taxes, yeah, I'm going to be in favor of raising those. I'm against regressive taxes, like gas taxes and taxes on medicine and taxes on things that affect everybody the same. They don't affect everyone the same, that poor people have to pay a larger percentage of their income. And so I believe in progressive taxes, not regressive. But let me tell you, if you care about reducing taxes, you stop the state of permanent war. We have spent at least $5 trillion with a T dollars prosecuting this failed war on terror. And let me tell you, if somebody says that educating our kids or giving us health care to stop a pandemic is paying too much on taxes, justify why you spend 5 times as much on a useless folly war. Thank you.
And Ms. St. John.
Thank you. If you look back, probably just since the late 90s, at all of the times that we have had trillions of dollars just go missing from various departments, usually like the Department of Defense is the biggest, I believe, offender. It really paints a very glaring picture that our tax dollars are not going to help the people. We don't know where our tax dollars are going. And when it's very, very offensive when people say, well, how are you going to pay for that when so much money goes missing? I am all for taxes, collecting money, collecting resources to help the common good of the people. But we can all see that we have a very, very flawed tax system. And it's not helping anybody except for the people on the very top.
Thank you. Mr. Kerr.
As I mentioned in a prior question, it is imperative that we reprioritize how we're spending our money first and foremost. The recent tax giveaway was the biggest scam ever perpetrated in my lifetime. The Fortune 500 companies have recorded record profits year after year since 2010. They were only paying 18.2% in terms of an effective tax rate anyway, and we turned around and passed that tax reform that burdens this country with over $1.4 trillion over the next 10 years. And that's only if you believe the numbers that the administration's put forth, and I don't. I think it'll easily be twice that. We need to reverse this tax reform, the tax reform bill that was passed. We need to change the structure under which we're taxing people in this country. And we need to start that as early as we can take control of the House in 2018.
Thank you. And we'll go on to the next question, and this will be addressed to candidates Schmidt, Jacobs, Applegate, and Pendleton. This is a challenging one. What do you believe are the 49's top 2 issues that your office will have a direct impact on? It also states, what will be your first piece of legislation? Now, if you can answer both of those in 1 minute, good for you. We're going to begin with Mr. Schmidt.
Well, I already mentioned the top 3, but I'll focus what I think are the top 2, immigration and healthcare. In healthcare, very simply, we need to inject market forces. All 4 of the Democrats, and I think Mr. Jordan Mills also believe in a state-run, state-owned, single-payer healthcare. What I believe works is what is currently working and has been demonstrated to work for 25 years in Singapore. They have better outcomes, longer lifespans, better infant mortality. They spend 4% of their GDP, we spend 18%. Unless we drop the cost of healthcare by injecting competition and market forces, we will continue to hook up a sucking sound out of our wallets via Medicare. By the way, on Medicare, as part of the immigration magnet, I say, let's bring in all of our family members, but nobody comes and goes on Medicare and Medi-Cal unless they've lived lawfully in the country for 15 years.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs, you're next.
I think the biggest issue that's facing our district is disparity in access to opportunity. Here in Oceanside, the poverty rate has increased from 7.8% to 14.2% in the last 7 years. So I want to focus on all of the things that will work to close that gap in access, including making sure that we're bringing down costs of things like healthcare and universalizing healthcare and including women's health, bringing down costs of higher education. I also think we need to make our workplaces more in line with 21st century families by making sure women are paid equally for equal work, and having a national initiative to make childcare more affordable, because right now one of the biggest barriers for women entering the workforce is access to affordable childcare. The first pieces of legislation I would introduce are using federal grant money to try and incentivize states to reform their money bail system and to reduce their prison population and ban private prisons, because our broken criminal justice system is one of the main reasons why we don't have equal access to opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Applegate.
It's real simple what the most important issue is within the 49th. All you have to do is go up the road and look at Camp Pendleton, and it's going to affect your children and your grandchildren with the October surprise that's coming. Because I see the same run-up with Iran that I've seen with Iraq where I served. It's war, all right? Congress is not doing their jobs. Democrats, independents, and Republicans have not stood up and voted on the use of military force but once since 9/11. It's unconstitutional, and all of them are cowards. That's what we need to do first and foremost. And it affects close to 150,000 people when you talk about veterans, their families, people aboard Camp Pendleton, their children and their grandchildren. The other issue is San Onofre. Get the nuclear waste off the beach to a less populated area as soon as possible. It will take 10 to 20 years if we started tomorrow, and we needed to start about 5 years ago.
Thank you. Mr. Pendleton.
Well, my long-term goal in Congress is to reform Congress. I'd like to get a majority of moderate representatives in Congress and span the political divide and actually move legislation forward. With a majority of moderates, we could put term limits on the Congress, we could end gerrymandering. I think 50% of our congressmen should actually be congresswomen. So that's a long-term goal. The first thing I would do is have a simple idea that would basically eliminate 98% of all state licensing boards by simply allowing licensed professionals and tradespeople, and there's 150 licensing boards in California, to practice their profession in any state. It's limiting our individual freedoms in favor of states' rights to collect tax money. And it's a simple act. You can invoke it using the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, and it would allow 30% of our workforce, which have licenses of various types, to practice their professions in any state.
Thank you. And we'll go on to the next question, which will be addressed to candidates Nordal, Medway, Hancock, and Schoonover. And the question is, do you think the federal government has a role in helping Oceanside with its homeless problem? If so, what is that role? And as I said, we're going to begin with Mr. Nordal.
Thank you. Yes, I think the federal government does have a role. However, the role isn't giving handouts to people, because that makes it worse. What the role is developing an economy, a thriving economy, where these people can get entry-level jobs. Obviously, there are people who are on drugs and different things that are going to need help. I think the most effective way to help those people is not to keep giving them handouts, but we have faith-based organizations that have had incredible success getting the homeless off the street. And all you have to do is go to Father Joe Carroll's work in downtown San Diego. I think probably the most successful organization of that type helping the homeless. That's where the effort should be, giving those organizations, if you want to give those organizations tax dollars to help with that, that would be a fantastic thing to do. These people need to get off the street, they need to get off their drugs, and they need the Lord. That's quite simply going to help them. So that would be my answer.
Thank you. Mr.
Yes.
Medway.
Yes. I take care of these patients every day, and I'm passionate about the care that I give them. I'm passionate about the care that I give everybody who comes to our clinic. And I would invite any of you to come to our clinic and see what a wonderful clinic it is and what wonderful care you would get at the Vista Community Clinic, where I'm a medical director. I made a choice to do that. And this is, my running here is a privilege. It's an extension of my passion to help people, to help my community. And these people do need help. Yes, the federal government should help. They should gladly help in California. When people have hepatitis, it affects all of us, not just the homeless. It's something that is very important that we take care of these people, and I'm very passionate about that.
Thank you. Mr. Hancock.
All right, I've done my research on this, and I've called down to the local homeless shelters. And there are three basic groups of homeless people. And the first group is the people that lost their homes to loss of their jobs or domestic violence. They just need a hand up, they need some help. And they have a transitional housing and work called Operation Clean Slate, and that's something that we could write a bill for and get, they call it log rolling, or if you want the other bad term for it, and you get the log rolling and you get some federal funds to help get assistance going for those people. The next one is behavioral or generational poverty. Most people don't know how to get up on time for work. They don't know how to, they need life coaches and a little bit more. We can't just give housing to the homeless because they don't know how to do it. The third group is the mentally ill. And they were kicked out of the mental institutions back in the 80s, and we can't keep them there. There's a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, and Mr. Schoonover.
Yes, thanks for asking this question. You know, I'm not sure, but I'd be willing to wager that I'm the only one on this stage who was homeless. I was homeless when I was 19 years old. I went through that difficult time, and I can tell you that the federal government absolutely has a part to play in it. It's largely a local issue. It's a San Diego County issue, and with respect to San Diego County homeless. But the federal government can offer things like student aid forgiveness, student loans. I took advantage of those opportunities. I went to school, I worked my butt off, earned a degree in chemical physics, went on to law school, and became a patent attorney. I've lived every situation from homeless and not knowing where your next meal is going to come from eating half-eaten sandwiches out of garbage cans, to being quite well off. I know what these people go through, and I know the federal government can do a lot to help them, but I think it's largely a county issue. Thanks.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm going to ask another yes or no question, and this will have to be the last question before their closing statements, because we are in a time cramp here, so we have to be finished by 8:30. So this is a yes or no. I'm going to ask you in random order to answer yes or no to this question. Are you for or against a citizenship question on the 2020 census? Yes or no? And let's see, Mr. Hancock.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Mr. Mills.
No.
Mr. Kerr.
No.
Mr. Applegate.
No.
Mr. Nordal.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Ms. St. John.
No.
Ms. Jacobs.
No.
Mr. Pendleton.
Yes.
Mr. Medway.
I can't answer the question because what is the citizenship question that they're asking?
Are you a citizen?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it that simple? Then that's fine.
And Mr. Schmidt.
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you for your candid answers to all of those questions. And now we are going to go to the closing statements. Each candidate has 2.5 minutes for a closing statement. And we are going in the reverse order in which we started this forum. So we will begin our closing statement with Mr. Schmidt.
Well, again, thank you very much for coming out. We can never, ever cover as much of depth of any of these candidates that we have. I would encourage you to go to my website, Mike Schmidt for Congress. Although it's spelled wrong here, it's 2 T's, Mike Schmidt, SCHMITT. You'll find that I have probably the most detailed policy positions of anybody on this dais. I take this very seriously. When I decided to come into this race, I did it principally because I saw the career politicians on one side who are not even here, by the way, kind of disrespectful to all of you, and the people who have been drugged so far to the left on the other side that I actually had nobody to vote for, and that's how I just came to decide to vote for, to come and run for office and serve people. I'm a healer. I have an oath to put people first. I would be honored to put every single one of you first as your representative in Congress. That's what I view as the congressman's job. Not to be detached, but to listen to you. In my candidate statement, I would encourage you to go read all of our candidate statements in the ballots. I put that I would put myself out with technology that would allow every single registered voter to weigh in on every vote, on every bill that I have. I'll keep regular office hours for my voters in the district, and I would love to serve you. I feel that I'm a patriot. I love this country. I think we're going to head into a new golden age, and I would love to serve each and every one of you out there. MikeSchmidtForCongress.com. Please take a look at that. I have all the social media. You can see how I think and how I approach things.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Mr. Kerr.
I just want to start by speaking a little bit about that church and state issue because I didn't get to answer that question. I believe possibly the questioner was wondering about the Johnson Amendment. I personally do not believe that churches should be getting involved with politics, which is the basis of that. But having said that, ladies and gentlemen, how many of you remember your first job? I remember mine like it was yesterday. picking onions with migrant farm workers. I was 12 years old. Folks, I come from a very humble background. When I was 16, my mom was diagnosed with ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. I talk about this quite a bit. I don't like to, but this job requires it. That disease, and we had insurance, almost pushed my family into bankruptcy. My dad almost lost his home. I am the most passionate advocate for Medicare for all you'll find on this planet. In fact, the financial pressure on my family was so great that I ended up going to the service. I dropped out of high school when I was 17. I enlisted in the Navy right here in town. Went to basic training off of Rosecrans, served 3 years basically on ships down in San Diego. After I got out, folks, I became one of those veterans. I struggled when I got out. In fact, the best job I could find was working as a busboy. We need to do more to prepare our veterans for civilian life, and I have a plan that I'd love to share with you. I spent the next 9 years working minimum wage jobs. I was a busboy, I was a waiter, I was a cook, I was a sales clerk at Sears, color tile, if you know where that is. Security guard at concerts, the guys that wear the yellow jackets. I know what an income inequality tastes like. I'm that guy, when the car broke down, you had to take the bus until Friday when you got paid. I will address those issues. That is a passion of mine. And then, unfortunately, the GI Bill, when I got around to getting it, expires 10 years after you got out of the service. I had spent 9 years getting my dealing with my demons. So I had to work full-time through college and take on student loan debt in order to graduate. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, if we're going to start solving the problems in this country, I believe that starts by electing people who actually understand them. My name is Paul Kerr. I'm a proud Democrat. I'm a very proud veteran, and I'd be honored by your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Ms. St. John.
Thank you. I think that the fact that I'm up here reflects very badly on politics in general. The fact that I had to come out of my regular life and actually do something about it, actually put my name on a ballot to fix things, it's a really sad reflection, I think, on our country. Now, I know that as a resident of this district, I'm very aware of the problems of not only people of my friends and family, but through this ministry work, I really got a good sense of how our prison industrial complex is destroying lives. And so this is my experience, this is my give back, this is my charity that I have been doing. I have been in the trenches of this district most of my life. But since we are here and I see that both sides of the aisle are they're bought and paid for, I think that one of the biggest things that I hope you guys can take away from this is that we all have to get involved. And we can't trust that our elected officials in the two-party system have our interest in mind. We really have to start going another route. We can't go left or right, we have to go up. We have to go above it, and we all have to get involved. I also would like to take this opportunity to ask that all of you call the San Diego County Registrar of Voters and make sure that they're going to be doing something so that there's no election fraud in this election, because last year there was rampant election fraud, and our Registrar of Voter, Michael Liu, was convicted of election fraud and still has his job. He came here from Ohio, and he was not convicted but charged with election fraud in Ohio, and he was moved to San Diego with a pay raise and did it again last year. So I think that one of the biggest things that I want you all to take away from this is that we all have to get involved. We all have to be up on this stage in some way. We all have to call. We all have to do our part. My name is Dannielle St. John.
What party?
Green Party.
Thank you, Ms. St. John. Next we'll hear from Mr. Mills.
Thank you. I'd just like to state that with all the different physicians on the dais up here with me, I've never felt so safe as someone who might have medical problems at any second, although after the political things that I said, maybe they won't want to help me, but I know they've taken it over. So I should be all right. And in keeping with the medical theme that we had with my opponents up here, I'd like to say that this country has war diabetes. And it is a potentially fatal case of war diabetes, and most people spend all their time arguing about whether they want to drink Coke or Pepsi. And by that I mean the two-party system as it exists. We've had situations where the President and Congress have been Republican and Democrat. They've had the Congress on their side and against them. They've had majorities going both ways, and we're entering our second generation of the war on terror, costing trillions of dollars and millions of human lives. The country's become a more hateful place. We don't have the same civil rights we had before, with the government listening in on our phones. We've got people dragging families apart due to national security issues because of this war on terror. And let me tell you, unless we deal with this fundamental problem, none of the issues that my fellow debaters up here are talking about are going to happen. You're not going to get the constitutional rights. You're not going to get the fiscal discipline. Your taxes will never go down. Your Constitution will not matter. It is the most important thing to do. And I applaud Colonel Applegate for telling the truth about how the plans for war in Iran are shaping up, and it's starting to look like an inevitability. And, you know, I know that Colonel Applegate's voters out there are big fans of him. I trust you would listen.
Could we please refrain from talking about other candidates, please?
Fine. Anybody who likes it, please join us on Sunday. I know that we can all agree on this. Maybe join us in the Answer Coalition with our anti-Iran war demonstration that we're having at Oceanside Pier. It would be great to see y'all come out, even though we might disagree on who to vote for. And finally, no one has brought this up as much as they need to, but I think it's disgraceful that the Attorney General of the United States of America came down to the border wall the other day and announced a policy where he would go against the policies of California and drag families apart at the border, changing immigration laws in a way that should terrify anyone who cares about civil liberty and cares about the hardworking immigrants that grow our food and make this country work. Please join us in the Answer Coalition in fighting against this, because it goes beyond Democrat and Republican. We have to do this in the streets.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Mr. Schoonover.
Thank you. It's really hard to follow Jordan. Listen, you know, we are an imperfect nation. We are an imperfect union. And in fact, our founders knew that, and when they wrote the preamble to the Constitution, and they said, in order to form a more perfect union, we do establish this Constitution. I'm an originalist when it comes to the Constitution. I wanted to touch on a few things I wasn't asked about tonight. I want to say, even though we're an imperfect union, we are the greatest country in the world. I mentioned to you I was a homeless teenager, and 18 years later, look, I'm up here on stage talking to you fine people. So, you know, I really am honored to have this opportunity. I'm honored to have met a lot of people in this district, thousands of people. I'm proud to say we had about 25,000 hits on our website this week alone. Maybe that's just because everyone got their ballots, but I'm just honored and privileged that people would take the time to look at the candidates' websites, especially mine, and just hear us out. So thank you, and I know some of you were a part of that. I want to touch on the San Onofre situation. I'm a Republican, but I consider myself fiscally responsible but socially balanced. I'm big on the environment. I'm a surfer. I believe that the nuclear waste should be dry cast, and I'm happy to say that the Congress overwhelmingly passed the restart for the Yucca Mountain repository, and I'm looking forward to that dry cast material being stored in a granite protected area. You know, I think San Onofre is just the worst place for it. But I'm also concerned about what Mexico is doing with dumping toxic waste and sewage in the Tijuana River. That needs to stop, and unfortunately Mexico is not going to do anything about it. I know we spent some money to build infrastructure several years back. We need to do it again. So I look forward to, if elected, using the political clout to approach businesses, private party groups, and government agencies, both in the United States and across the border, to raise the funding necessary to build those divergent systems and proper treatment facilities. I think that's a big issue for San Diego. I also believe term limits is a big issue. I've drafted the legislation to take term limits to Congress. I figured out how to remove that conflict of interest. And I'd invite you to look at that proposed legislation. It's on my website, www.joshuaschoonover.com.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Okay, sorry.
Mr. Hancock.
I'd like to thank all of you for having me out here tonight. Also, and I'm fiscal conservative, and the median in California makes around $68,000 a year. The taxes on that are 9.2 state income tax, 25% federal income tax, 6% Social Security, 3% Medicare, 1% property tax, $1.50 gallon gas tax, 8% sales tax, and I could keep going. Which roughly comes out to about a 45% tax rate on the median wage earner in California. This is entirely too much. We need a flat or fair tax, which would be a national sales tax, and Congress should be able to adjust that depending on their needs. And the first two things I would do in Congress is a balanced budget amendment. Congress shouldn't be spending more than what they bring in. Our national debt's at $21.1 trillion, and our interest payment on the national debt is around $300 billion a year. So that's $300 billion that's just going to pay down our debt. Also, the second thing would be the War Powers Act amendment. I would get the legislative branch is less likely to get us into war than the executive branch, and the founding fathers put it in that branch for a reason, to be able to declare war. We need to get it back into that section. And also, our schools. California spends $89 billion on public education, which roughly breaks down to $13,900 per student. And when it gets down through the administration and all the extra stuff, they get about $200 for their education. And we have a one teacher to one administrator in the California education system, and we should do something about that, because we can't just throw money at the issue. It won't help it. And also our healthcare spending, the average American spends between personal, corporate, and government $9,500 a year. So if we were to go with the universal health care, that would cost the federal government an additional $3 trillion a year, which would almost double our national budget, and it would bankrupt the country. And as a fiscal conservative, that would be very bad. So thank you. Vote Josh Hancock, 49th, back to us.
Thank you. Mr. Medway.
Yes. So, as I mentioned, I've written a book to help people protect them against catastrophe. One of the catastrophes that we have is the catastrophe of obesity in our country right now. Obesity-related illness is costing about $200 billion. It's about a quarter of our healthcare debt on a yearly basis. So this is something that I feel very passionate about. You said diabetes is a real problem. Diabetes is a real problem, not just, you mentioned in terms of the military. In terms of the military, we need a strong military. Look what's happening since the Iranian nuclear agreement's been passed. They've set off over 20 ballistic missiles. 10 of them are nuclear ready. I'm against the nuclear agreement. I'm for women's right to choose. I'm the moderate candidate. The other candidates here, I think, are either far left or far right. I'm in the middle. I protect my patients. I don't have big PAC money behind me. I'm doing this to help people, to help you, to help my family. My daughter is here right now. I'm so proud of that. That's why I'm here. I'm here to protect you. If you choose me, fantastic. I'm delighted. I will be honored to work and serve you as a passionate protector for you. If you don't, then so be it. But I will tell you, there will be nobody more passionate than me to help you. And I am not bought by anybody, no political PAC. And I'm not a self-funded billionaire. I am me, and I'm going to protect you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Nordal.
Thank you. First, I'd just like to thank everyone here for participating, whether you agree with me or any of the other candidates. This is what the Founding Fathers said. We have to have participation. We have to have people who care. And if we don't, democracy will fail. I was the first person to file paperwork in this race among all the candidates. You can go to the San Diego County registrars and see that the date that I filed, I was the first person. Darrell Ison showed up at our church one day in early January, completely unexpected. I'd never seen him there before. One of my biggest passions and one of the first legislations I would want to pass is to get rid of Roe v. Wade, or actually to make unborn children, to give them personhood status and protect them from conception. I talked to Darrell. He was very gracious with me. At that time, I had no idea he was not going to run. About 2 weeks later, I heard on the news, and I knew immediately that I had to run. We need moral men and women to stand up and run in this country. That is our problem, folks. We have a matter of the heart in this country that needs to be healed, and the only way it can be healed is with moral men and women running this country. Law and order has to thrive, or else you see what happens. It creates chaos. The Founding Fathers knew this. Let me say one thing about immigration. I'm for border. I'm for protecting those families in their country so they aren't abused. This is from a liberal organization, Huffington Post. 70 to 80% of the women who come across this border and children are abused. Is that the price that these poor people have to pay to come here for the freedom that we all enjoy? I don't think so. We need to help those countries' economies so they'll stay where they are, and to make it more efficient for these people to get in, the ones that we want to allow in to help this country. We want it to work. I'm going to read two things if I have time. George Washington was the father of our country, and this is my favorite George Washington quote. To the distinguished character of patriot, it should be our highest glory to add the more distinguished character of Christian. And John Adams added to that, it is religion and morality alone which can establish the principles upon which freedom can securely stand. The only foundation of a free constitution is pure virtue. Ladies and gentlemen, without that, this country will fail, and you see that it is. Please go to nordalforcongress.com, nordalforcongress.com. I have 6 videos on all the issues. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And next we have Mr. Pendleton.
Okay, over and over again on the campaign trail, I hear my competitors appealing to moderate voters. Who are moderates? They are fiscally responsible Democrats. They are socially liberal Republicans. They are independent. They are undecided. And they are no party preference. Moderate voters hold the key to the outcome of this election and the key to the future political direction of our nation. But there are two critical elements that moderates lack. They lack unity, and they lack adequate representation. It's time for disenfranchised moderates to unite in a new political party and bridge the political divide between left and right. One more Republican or one more Democrat in Congress will only lead to more of the same bipartisan gridlock. K9 is a moderate political party, an elegant, simple, cohesive philosophy of decision-making that can empower and unite moderate voters. By building the party on a foundation of principles and shared values, K9 will marginalize the socialist extremists that have corrupted Democrats with their fiscally unrealistic, give everything to everybody platform, and marginalize Republican extremists that threaten women's reproductive rights and have legitimized racism and tyranny. With our country so evenly divided, even a single moderate representative could swing the outcome of divisive votes. Once united, moderates can institute true congressional reforms like term limits and put an end to gerrymandering and reverse unfair campaign finance regulations. I'm a physician, a scientist, a successful small business owner, and founder of a new political movement with truly innovative ideas. For example, the Portability of Our Professions Act that I have proposed is a simple, no-cost act that would enhance individual freedoms and eliminate government waste by effectively shutting down 98%, that's 49 out of 50, of all state licensing boards, simply by allowing licensed professionals to practice their trade or profession in any state. Donkeys and elephants have failed. It's time for dogs to lead. Please vote for me, Dr. Robert Pendleton, for Congress.
Thank you. Mr. Applegate.
Jordan, thank you for those kind words, and believe me, if you needed help, I'd have your back, all right? I'm going to ask you to do something different. A young president once asked citizens that ask what you can do for your country. What I see is a polarized nation that's unlike anything I've seen, and I'm one of the, unfortunately, older people up on this dais. We need to start talking with one another, but we need to start talking with one another without labels, without personalities, and talk about the issues. Because in the past 3 years, when I've gone around and talked about health care as a right and how it will change how workers view what they negotiate for, it would change everything. When I talk about education and starting earlier, that's going to deliver child care in the form of education, not just warehousing children. And when I talk about renewables, nobody cares whether or not you're a Democrat or a Republican. We don't have a lot of oil money in California, even though we've been fracking and we shouldn't. But what we need to do is talk to one another on the issues, not as Republicans, not as Democrats, but as Americans. Because that's the world I've lived in since becoming a Marine in '74. We talk to each other like brothers and sisters. And that's what Americans have stopped doing. That's what I've learned in the last 3 years. And that's what we need to do if we want to aspire to what we have. We've had a rocky start. African Americans were counted as 2/3 of a person. We have not been the perfect country. We committed genocide on Native Americans. If we continue to talk to one another as wearing different jerseys, we aren't going anywhere. And I'm pleading that we change that perspective. And don't worry about changing Congress, because that's a self-licking ice cream cone. It's the only place I've ever seen where you can keep your job by getting nothing done. But we can get things done in the 49th if we change the way we send our leaders back to D.C.
Thank
Take a look
you.
at my website, Applegate for Congress. Thank you very much.
And lastly, we're going to hear from Ms. Jacobs.
Well, thank you all so much again for being here, and to the organizers and my fellow participants. Since I wasn't asked the question on homelessness, I figured I'd just address it a little bit right now. We know we have a homelessness and affordable housing crisis here. In Oceanside alone, more than 50% of the renters pay more than 30% of their income on rent. And San Diego County has the 4th largest homeless population in the entire country. And yet we're only 20th in terms of the funding we get from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So we need a federal representative that can work with the department to modernize the funding formula so that our region gets the funding that we need. We also need to stand up and make sure that there is funding for Section 8 vouchers and crack down on discrimination in housing and predatory lending practices. We need to make sure that the Veterans Healthcare Administration is able to provide the mental health care that our veterans need, and that the Veterans Administration is able to provide services to our homeless veteran population. And right now, 40% of youth that are homeless are LGBTQ+ youth, most of whom have been kicked out of their homes. And so we need to make sure that we are adequately addressing and providing services to that population. Look, if we're going to be able to solve challenging, complex problems, we need new, fresh approaches. With everything that's going on in our country and the world, we just don't have time for the same politicians with the same ideas. I'm proud to be born and raised in a district that has so much innovation and opportunity, and I'm running because I believe that everyone deserves access to that opportunity. As a young woman, I'm often told to wait my turn. But at the end of the day, it's my generation that's going to be dealing with the consequences of these policy decisions longer than anybody else. I'm proud that I'd be the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. We've never had a woman in their 20s, and yet we've had 122 men of that age. And right now, women make up less than 20% of Congress. And we know that that matters because we've seen what it looks like when a room full of men try and legislate on women's health. And we've seen that it's women from both sides of the aisle that have come together and been able to actually pass bipartisan legislation. Right now, we're seeing young people across the country get engaged and involved and lead the way on issues like gun violence prevention. And we need to be showing all of them that their voice matters and that they don't need to wait to make a difference. So I hope that you'll join us. And again, my name is Sara Jacobs, and I would be really honored to have your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's hold it for just a moment more. Don't forget that for more information on both the candidates and the ballot propositions, you can go to our website, votersedge.com/ca. We also have voters registration forms in the back and additional information about League of Women Voters. Lastly, I really want to thank you, the audience. You have been fantastic. And thank you to the candidates. They have chosen to run for office. They've shown courage to do so. And they are showing that democracy works. Let's give them a big